two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but today we are going back in time to some interesting animation filmmagery. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this ancient film, Mo? Tell us a little bit about it.
Alrighty, this is Fire and Ice that we're talking about tonight. It's the second part of our back-to-back Bakshi thing we've been doing these past couple of weeks. It came out in 1983. It was directed by Ralph Bakshi. It was produced by Frank Frazetta and Ralph Bakshi. It's pretty much just a giant collab between the two. It was written by Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas. It's based on characters created by Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta. And it stars several people. Susan Tyrrell, Maggie Roswell, William Ostrander, Stephen Mendel, and Steve Sendor, among others. It's got music by William Kraft. It was, the production company was Producers Sales Organization, which just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And then it was distributed by 20th Century Fox. Pretty much based solely on the financial longevity, it says, of Wizards, which we covered last week. It's a movie that I've seen a lot over the years. But I'll go ahead and hand it off to you guys for your first impressions. We'll start with you, Brandon.
I had thought I'd seen this movie. I even thought I owned this movie, but apparently I had not on either count. But I have remedied it on both accounts, so that's a plus. It's kind of weird. When I saw this, it reminded me of something I used to watch on the Cartoon Express back on USA. With the old cartoons, like the Herculoids, if anybody remembers that one. Or
yes.
Conan the Adventurer.
Yeah, stuff like that. It had a very interesting quality. I thought that the motion capture technology, which continues to be utilized here, was really cool, but of course the lack of blood in it kind of made me go especially where he hits a guy in the head with the axe, like straight on, and nothing. But
well,
maybe those cavemen had hard skulls.
I'll argue just a smidge against that when it comes to it. Just throwing that out there.
But otherwise, I thought it was a fairly decent movie. Wizards definitely is my favorite of the two, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, this one's definitely more of a visual affair. It's a lot lighter on the plot and character development, or whatever you want to call it. There's certainly some developed stuff in here. Let's we'll get to that. Let's go ahead with you, Dane. Yeah. What was your first impressions of this? Is it your first time watching it?
Yes, it is. It was something I'd wanted to see for a while. Glad I finally saw it, and I enjoyed it. Well, you can definitely tell it was something that Ralph Bakshi did, and I mean that as a compliment. The advantage there is that he was one of the few American filmmakers who was willing to do more adult 2D animation, and that's a tragically short list. It was then, it remains even shorter to this day, as in pretty much no one that I can think of outside of like something like South Park or whatever, but that's, television. But I enjoyed it. Like you said, it was kind of light on plot or depth or anything like that, but at the same time, it delivers the goods in a bunch of different avenues, and it's very much rooted in that like classical fantasy pulp fiction of like Robert E. Howard and kind of early L. Ron Hubbard, because if I recall, he did fantasy as well as science fiction. But yeah, that like people of that particular era, and then of course with the 80s, you got to see a bit of a resurrection of that in both film and role-playing games and things like that. So, it's definitely heavily rooted in that. But I did enjoy it on that level. I will say just very quickly, as far as there not being that much blood. Yes, I noticed that too. But I will say something that I've apparently this is true. I've looked into it that apparently for most things, well, certainly with gunshots, I'm not sure so much about blunt force with a sharp object, but generally speaking, in terms of bloodshed, for the most part, the actual amount of blood spilled isn't nearly as much as movies tend to portray, at least not right away. And then, of course, once the wound gets a few seconds to sink in, then you start to see more gushing from the wound. But it wasn't like how we're used to seeing it. It was like 300, where it's, or like Kill Bill, where it's like a fountain of blood or anything like that.
Oh, I'm not talking like big old like blood spills. I'm just talking like even like an open wound or even like an acknowledgement that it did something to the skull. I've seen somebody had their head caved in with just smashing it into a windshield, and there was a lot more damage to that person's forehead than the person's head that got hit in the head hard with an axe blade first.
Right. Yeah, I think my thought.
Were you running?
It would at least.
Were you running grandmother? Were you running grandmothers over in the parking lot of the old folks' home again?
Only on weekends.
It was her time to go,
Well, that's when they're easier.
Pick them off when they're weak and slow.
Exactly.
I think I was thinking that this time
they're
through
weary.
too. I was
They're
definitely.
weary
I
from the
noticed
game of bingo.
I definitely noticed that the lack of blood more this time. I don't know why it had never really registered to me before. I think part of it was that it looked a lot more realistic, So maybe they held back a little bit because they didn't want to just straight mess up some kids that would watch this one, even though there is some female form involved. It's a lot more family friendly than like other Bakshi stuff for sure. So.
Or something like heavy metal.
Definitely.
Right.
Although I will say that it was a lot less well, it's funny because like it's overt in the sense that it's readily visible, but is not overt in some of the ways I was expecting, which is kind of interesting. But we'll get to that as we go.
Oh, for sure. What about you there, Forrest? Was this your first time watching it? I think you said you watched it like 3 times, actually. So
I watched it 3 times in the last 48 hours. I mean, I've tried watching this movie before, but every time I've watched it, it's always been like late at night. I usually end up nodding off. And like every time I've tried watching this in the past, I've always nodded off to sleep. But this is my first time. But these last 3 times, these last 48 hours was my first time watching it from beginning to end without falling asleep. And I really like really love the animation. It looks fantastic. I definitely agree that as far as storytelling, Wizards was better. And also as far as being like sort of a, I guess maybe a dark. I don't know, it's more of a high fantasy than dark fantasy, but. Because I was looking for more. Because I guess at the time when I first saw this movie, first time trying to watch this movie, I remember I was just looking for movies kind of like in the vein of heavy metal,
right?
As far as darker, more intense, Western animated films. But overall, I think so. But I thought it kind of tame in that regard. But I still found it overall enjoyable. Also, because I saw that it was co-written by Jerry Conway, who co-created the Punisher, my favorite Marvel character. So they had that going for it too.
Oh yeah, some pedigree on that for sure.
And Roy Thomas? Roy Thomas. Well, also in there. I mean, both of those are like massively huge, heavy hitters at Marvel and comics in general at that time. So I mean, these are not lightweights.
I really liked how they employed like unlike almost a lot of comic book movies. They actually hired actual comic writers to do the story. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, and both those
That
guys,
you know how
being
long
like
it
Conan
you know
authors, were
you
experienced in this.
well, you know how long it took for Hollywood to realize that that was a good idea. You know, like on a mainstream level, like it took them decades to understand that. Oh, gee whiz, the people that write this stuff or have experience in this field, maybe they might be good to take a crack at this on the big screen.
Yeah.
So it took them to get that, but then once they did, it's like, oh, gee whiz, no wonder it translates better.
Yeah, comics were way ahead of the curve on that because it wasn't uncommon to see like movie or TV people coming in to write some comics back in the day, but it didn't really go the other way as often as it should.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's more in the vein of like Beastmaster and Conan than it is heavy metal for sure, or even, Wizards. It's straight-laced fantasy. It's not fantasy written by a bunch of stoner kids in a basement,
Well,
which
I was
both
gonna
are
say,
great.
like, I expected this to be a lot more. I mean, I think those same kids would still like this quite a lot. So
Oh,
let's
yeah.
not let's not discount that. But also, I think that this was definitely more. I don't want to say tamer. That's not the right word, but it was less about like heavy metal was all about the melting. Like that
Yeah.
was all about just like any
was a lot.
excuse we can get to get people to melt. That's what we're gonna do, and it had a lot more
Yeah.
like explicit, gratuitous like sex and nudity and stuff. And this was more. Both the men and the women being very scantily clad, but for the most part, having every reason to be that way. Except, one of my criticisms, and I'll get to this later on, is just the fact that some of the world building didn't make a lot, but we'll not get ahead of ourselves.
Whole lot of butt cheek in this movie. That's the disclaimer we'll put on it right here. Whole lot of up close shots of butt cheek.
Ass, literally.
Men, from both men and women. In fact, there was more ass per minute of screen time than there was.
The only ass grab in the movie happens to Lauren or whatever when he's trying to climb that tree, and that subhuman gets a good handful of that tush. I love it.
I noticed that.
Had a lot of bounce to it, actually. He had like the nicest ass in the movie. The girls was pretty good, but his was like perfectly proportioned.
Apparently, we're getting a comment from the audience. Nathaniel Hadsock, thanks for the comment. Did you know that Randy Orton was a model for the hero?
I could believe it.
I noticed that. I was like, is that Randy Orton or Randy Norton? And it was Norton with an N, because Randy Orton was probably just a wee thing at that time.
Interestingly enough, I mean, we'll go through this after Dave's first impressions here, but a lot of these people, like the people that played them in the live action for the rotoscoping, also voiced the characters. So it's kind of like you're watching just a real movie that's been animated over.
Yeah.
So is this your first time watching this, Dave?
No, I watched this like when I was a kid, but I guess this is the first time I actually paid attention to all the details. So for me, I actually thought this story was. I had the opposite sort of effect of Wizards. I actually enjoyed this story more. I thought it was very well fleshed out, so to speak. And you definitely get an eyeful of the characters and their butt cracks, but I personally enjoyed all the colorful sceneries. I mean, from a moment it went from where it started out like Quest for Fire, where it had that little battle scenery, and they're just literally cavemanning the shit out of people, and dude ends up swinging on vines and shit, so that's kind of like Tarzan. And then you get a myriad of things, and I saw things like he was running away from the hyenas. What the hell? That happened in Lion King later on with Disney. I mean, you had 3 hyenas chasing the little man cub into an elf.
Oh, those dogs. Yeah. Okay. I was like hyena. Oh, okay.
And then a little bit later, what's her name? She's standing on top of a rock, just like Pocahontas.
Tigra?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all kind of do have friggin' Thundercat names too. I was noticing that this time. Like, every one of these could have been a Thundercat.
I was like,
Juliana.
Disney ripped the shit out of this movie when they did
Well,
it.
interestingly enough, one of the dudes was working on it while he was simultaneously working for Disney. So, he's pulling a little side job here. We also have the dude that created Aeon Flux working on this.
Lion King came several years later, and Pocahontas
years later.
somewhat either before or behind that. So to me, working some of those scenes, I mean, when you see some of these stances that they make and some of the scenes, it's like, holy shit, this is like the cartoon that everything was based on,
Well,
I mean,
looking at it as like the accomplishment of animation that it is, I would imagine a lot of people in the fields like got around to seeing it at some point,
And took inspiration from
an animation, just like any other art form, any other I was gonna say genre, but animation's more of a technique. But it's like just like any other aspect of film, tends to cannibalize itself quite a lot. Well, if not cannibalize at worst, or get inspired by it best. I mean, as far as the Lion King goes, I mean, they apparently, I haven't seen the other film, but apparently they kind of outright stole from Kimba the White Lion, and so it's one of those things where, again, usually live action films do that all the time, where you can pick out the visual language of film pretty clearly from things that have existed before, and especially if the artist is not necessarily trying to think outside the box too much.
Right. I don't know. I think that's, there's a lot worse things that you could rip stuff off from. I mean, I feel like an animated movie, there's little bits of Fire and Ice and like heavy metal and wizards that would make it in there,
Right.
A bunch of Land Before Time references, because I just can't get enough of that movie.
I just feel like this film was a hell of a lot better than Wizards. It was a hell of a lot put together color-wise. I mean, some of the creatures were a little bit more believable.
Right.
They were definitely a lot darker. You kind of had a Skeletor thing going on with Lord Necron.
He's having Madgasms up there, just like making that ice grow.
I just loved that part where that woman that ended up being a skeleton. She was like, "Revenge me,"
Oh yeah, Rolale or whatever her name is.
Rolale.
Yeah, her and her son are pretty crazy. Both characters that are played, they're live action models, the same person who voiced them, which is just crazy with Otwa, that big gargantuan dude.
Mm-hmm.
See a picture of that guy in real life. So I guess that's a good segue into the characters. I mean, we got the RKO himself, the rattlesnake there, Randy Orton playing Lauren. Randy Norton was his performance model, and his voice actor was William Ostrander. What do you guys think of him as a good sort of carbon copy of the guy from Beastmaster?
Or He-Man.
No,
Just no
he
parrots.
ain't no Conan, that's for sure.
I mean, we've already, we've commented on his glorious glutes, but go ahead there, Brandon. What were you going to say?
I don't know why, but every time I do this, I think Herculoids. I don't know if any of y'all are others of y'all are familiar with that show, because it is old. But gosh, it's sad to think about something like that as being old, but it is. And it just there was a lot of caveman culture back in that time period, it seemed like.
Oh yeah, lots of loincloths going around.
I remember that was like, it was like this thing about this group of cavemen. I think there was a cave woman, and there were these weird blob-like creatures, and they had to fight a bad guy of some sort. I wouldn't be able to tell you what bad guy, but some bad guy. But they'd always win because they were, the good guys. Good cave people. And that's what this always reminded me of. It's just that same thing there, and Masters of the Universe. That was another thing it's kind of reminded me of.
Oh, for sure.
So definitely a lot of childhood nostalgia vibes coming off of this, which is why I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, he looks like the lead caveman in this.
Right.
Except,
yeah, you could
except
totally.
for Quest for Fire.
I mean, there's several NES games from the time too, where the main character, your avatar, kind of looks roughly like this dude. He's a good sort of just generic enough that you can kind of superimpose him on all of the stuff of the time, and you can sort of see it all streamed through him as your main character there. We don't really ever get any backstory on him. He's just this dude that's there when the ice is coming. He's just one of the tribe members or whatever. And he just kind of runs across Tigra after she's abducted. She is Gerald. He's like the king of Firekeep. She's his daughter, and Necron and Juliana have her kidnapped by the subhumans at one point in the movie, and she ends up running across Larn. And she's okay. I think they did a good job with her of like making up for, was it Eleanor in Wizards being kind of just eye candy. Tigra's kind of a badass, she kills several people. She saves Larn's life at one point. She's down to rock and roll.
Times, actually.
Yeah, I mean, she's willing. She wants to get out there in the fight. That's literally the introduction to the character. She's sitting there with her tutor, and she's kind of trying to teach her like some crap that she has no interest in. She'd rather be out there fighting, and she even makes the comments like, what, I'm supposed to get smart and look pretty while we save all the glory in fighting for the men.
Yep.
Yeah, which here's the interesting thing with it's funny because David brought up the Disney connections and stuff, which when he was first saying that, I was like, I don't know, but then you saying that, my brain was immediately reminded of the Disney connection that I made, which was in our introduction to her, Tigra, that her introduction is very similar to Princess Jasmine from Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a large, large cat painting, except this one right away. But then, so I noticed that right away. Plus, that temperate zone port city place looked an awful lot like Agrabah, except that there's a more direct explanation for the origin of the look of Agrabah, which it's ripped from The Thief and the Cobbler, which was in development for decades prior to Aladdin coming out. That's more of a direct connection, but even so, it's like clearly lifting from Arabian architecture. But yeah, that was a Disney connection I noticed. But then also with her, like she, part of why I think the scantily cladness of her, but also everyone else, it's like because everyone else, like there are very few characters that wear anything remotely close to what we would now call clothing. Most almost like I think everybody except the two antagonists and that one witch with her son or whatever, they're the only ones I can think of that wear actual clothes that are not just like loincloths basically.
Dark Wolf strips down at one point, and it is fucking weird, dude.
Yeah,
that's the worst ass in the movie easily.
Yeah, well, I found it interesting because, it's one of those things where she's very, she kind of Kardashians a run for their money, but she also, relative to the way that everyone else is in the movie, it's like she doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb, really, and it makes sense for her people as to why. They would be scantily clad as they're living, on the side of a volcanic, mountain range. Although I don't know why they are relatively light skinned, and then whatever those are, the subhumanoid people of the ice world, why they are also scantily clad and why they have darker skin, and then when our volcanic protagonists, when they're going down to this ice environment, why they don't bundle up, and why they're mostly walking around barefoot or with their normal footwear. But
That's where
I'm gonna get into a side rant about that later.
that's where I think about the time machine with Eloy and the Morlocks.
Oh yeah.
Kind of because the Morlocks were sub-humanoid characters, and they were kind of a greenish bluish kind of skin, no matter which movie you put them in. So, and then of course the people on up top from Overworld ended up being light skinned. So that to me kind of made sense in a sense. So
Well, more
it does,
an
and
interesting
if you're
thing.
looking at it through that, through that paradigm, then certainly it's one of those things. I just, generally speaking, in hot environments, more so with the sun. I don't know about like a volcanic environment because, like, for example, like Iceland is relatively warm because of their volcanic geothermal energy, and they're all like really, really pale. So I mean, I could be wrong, but yeah, my brain was like, well, generally speaking, people that are in warm climates tend to have relatively dark skin, and people that are in cold climates tend to have pretty light skin. But again, it's there's a couple of things that I'm like, things that kind of stuck out to me.
I think it's more of a sun. It's more of a sun exposure thing, though. I do agree with the Morlock concept, which is pretty cool. And it is a movie, the original. I don't really care as much for the remake, but Time Machine is freaking awesome and should be covered. But as far as the female character, we were talking about her. I will say that I liked her much more than I liked the main female character from Wizards.
Yeah.
Because for me, the one from Wizards was kind of just this passive female sex object, essentially.
Right.
Whereas this woman actually is a little bit more of her own person. She knew what she wanted. She could kick ass occasionally. I felt like she was more relatable as a character than the other one. Though I still prefer the other movie, but that character wise, I would say yes.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, she was someone that she was like, they make a point of saying that she's, lovely, which is, as far as like, quote unquote objectification or whatever, lovely is like a perfectly fine word, perfectly fine adjective as far as I know. I mean, for all I know, that could be considered problematic tomorrow, but as far as that kind of thing goes, that's pretty minor. But for her, it's more so that her, being very well endowed, it's more of a function of the fact that this is Frank. Well, what's the other guy? Frank Frazetta.
Yeah.
That is kind of his style for both the men and the women. The men are like these Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, those kinds of Mr. Universe types, and the women are like, really gorgeous and big boobs, big asses, everything, long hair. But that's the whole appeal of that 80s high fantasy kind of thing. It's like these idealized bodies, that are very kind of almost Greek in origin, except that more modern in their body proportions than the Greeks, because the Greeks tended to like small penises on their men for whatever reason. Anyway, it's an interesting thing because for her it's more of like a function of overall aesthetic rather than it is like this person has no intrinsic value of her own or anything like that.
They probably do a better job of making her like a strong female character than most fantasy stuff at the time.
You want those stereotypes? You should watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Look at those proportions.
Well, dude, and it goes without saying, I'm sure they had a lot of fun animating over the footage of this lady because she is pretty smoking.
Yeah.
I was gonna say she could out Kardashian pretty much all of the Kardashians, I think.
Oh man, when she's running from those guys, I could not stop laughing thinking about people animating that. Like, I might have put in some overtime on that day, you know.
Well, then you'd have to if you did that, then most of those guys would have to like clean off their workstations, and then they'd have to start over again.
Oh boy. And you know, as equally fun as that was, animating over the footage of Dark Wolf was probably super uncomfortable. That guy was getting into it. Those like magical scenes where he's erecting the ice. What did you guys think of him as a character? I thought it was cool.
I love Dark Wolf. He was definitely. I mean, I think it's
Necron that I was talking about. But we'll go ahead and do Dark Wolf, the barbarian guy. My bad.
I preferred him over Necron, actually. Because
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I thought he had more personality than Necron. Necron was kind of a 2D character who was, I'm evil. I will sit here and be evil.
I'll take a slight disagreement with that, and I'll tell you why. But just before we, what'd you say his name was? Dark Wolf or whatever?
Dark Wolf. Yeah, my brain mixed up the two names on the list.
But he was. I was like, oh, hi, prehistoric Batman, except without a bat motif, but totally acting like Batman in every other respect. You know, or at least
Solo, I'd say.
Or someone in that kind of low nerve vigilante masked hero mode with the glowing eyes that you can't see, which again, that's what's hitting off in the, you can't see his eyes, but you can see his mouth, and it's like, that's very Batman like. But yeah, I think again, every character in here is in this story is 100% fitting into a pre-existing archetype. Like there really are no characters that I can think of that were like, oh yeah, I've never seen a character like that before. But then again, that's not really the point of this film. It's more of an homage to all of those archetypes. Now, as far as our masked vigilante archetype, but in a more primitive setting, yeah, I think he was one of the better characters for sure.
Oh, he kicks ass from like moment one, you know, and has some of the best scenes in the movie for sure. When he's fighting off those dudes on the rock, or like when he storms the.
I mean, I was definitely more tuned in when he was on screen.
Oh,
he's like that suicidal kamikaze dude that doesn't fear death, and you just send him in, you know, to kill. And
right.
He's totally awesome in whatever he tends to do. I mean, he had the idea to take the dragon hawks into the fortress. So
yeah, I mean, it's
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's you know, they do a good job with him too, of like obviously setting up that the character has some history. I mean, there's like a statue of him in that one ruin that they're in, or at least something representing his tribe. And obviously he has like some crazy vendetta against Necron and his mom, because he wants to straight up murder him. And as we'll see later on, he pretty much gets his wish. But I kind of, that's one of the areas where not fleshing out the story to the letter is kind of neat, because it adds an element of mystery to him for sure. And that just makes him cooler. You know, he's already kicking ass, but then it's like, why does he kick so much ass, you know?
Oh yeah, well, giving characters a hidden history is often a good way to build them up, make them more interesting to the audience, and yeah, I think he definitely has this, and I think his relentlessness is a very interesting aspect to him, and you know, he's very much kind of like this universe's well, I said Batman, but also like this universe's equivalent of almost like a Viking berserker, you know, someone like that is just not afraid of going headlong into combat, you know.
He seems to actually kind of look forward to it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Any other thoughts on Dark Wolf before we hit that creep Necron?
Well, there's a similar character in Hanna-Barbera's Thundar the Barbarian.
Another one of those, yes.
Nostalgic.
Which has characters that look similar to this. And what I was noticing is that the writer, one of the writers of the screenplay, he is behind Conan the Destroyer, Roy Thomas, and the other screenwriter, Gary Conway. Both of them were on Conan the Destroyer as screenplay writers. So
And it was Gary Conway, if I recall, who was responsible. Was one of them. I can't remember which one, but one of them. They were responsible for helping to resurrect Conan as a character into the comic book world. One, but also number two, just in the public consciousness prior to the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I know that there was kind of a resurrection of some of those old school high fantasy elements, and if not that, then also like your some aspects of like prehistoric fiction. Like I'm thinking Khazar, Marvel Comics, and the Savage Land. The part of Antarctica. Should be cold, but then all of a sudden it has this one little patch that is prehistoric, and is really warm and everything inexplicably.
Right, and we don't see any dinosaurs other than the firehawks in this, but they definitely do. Well, I guess if you count that water lizard,
Right.
but you see like a triceratops skeleton at one point. So I definitely can see like that, plus all the jungly stuff. I could see the connection to Savage Land. Plus Larn kind of looks like that dude.
There's a lot of overlap with Conan specifically, because that's in like an explicitly like prehistoric time, basically. Not so much in terms of cave people like we think of, but before recorded history, nonetheless. But still with some primitive forms of civilization. So it's rooting itself partially in prehistoric fiction and what we think of with cavemen and stuff, but there's still magic and there's still these kinds of things. And I cannot remember what tribe was Conan a part of. There was like a specific name for it. I just can't remember what it was.
Shit, I forget.
But point being that the two, in a lot of 80s high fantasy fiction, those things are not too disconnected from each other. It's not like what you would see in like the 90s onward, things that are more medieval in their origins, or especially once the Lord of the Rings movies in live action, once those came out, then, and then you had like World of Warcraft and everything that was explicitly medieval influenced and not really like prehistoric.
Shifted.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And dude, this guy Steve Sandor, who played Dark Wolf as the performance model and the voice actor, easily could have fit in a Conan movie. Dude is cut as shit, especially in like that scene where he's attacking Necron. Man, his pecs were going crazy. Like Arnold would have been jealous himself of that. Guy was pumped.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean that's the thing. Is like he got the who, with some variation, but for the most part, it's just the case. The who are as ripped or more ripped than Arnold in his prime, and then you've got our leading lady who is like as well developed as like a Kardashian prior to all the extensive plastic surgery.
Yeah. So what did you guys think of Necron and his mom Juliana? I guess those are like our last main characters, and then we can sort of bang through. Really, the movie is just a collection of favorite scenes, so it should be pretty easy on that front. But what do you think of our villains there?
Well, I
have quite a say about him, but I'll let everyone else go first.
I kind of like them. It's kind of like he's trying to be evil, and she's trying to manipulate him because, and I actually found it kind of comical that she brought Tigra to him, and the speech that she gave to him, and he just kind of laughed at her.
Yeah, savage.
And he was like, "What you think I want peace?"
Hey, they were kind of progressive with him on that front, I think, because he just totally turns her down, like just casually. But then later he sees Lauren and he's like, "Ooh, look at that! I'm gonna take my clothes off and sword fight this guy." So I think she misread her son a little bit and what his predilections were or whatever.
Or did she? Because that was sort of my theory of the whole thing, which is that, see, initially I was going to say that there were strong gay undertones with him, except that I think those undertones became pretty readily obvious overtones. So I don't think I can really say that. But what I will say is I think that, well, I did find it refreshing, certainly at that time. Because what was this, 83, something like that?
Yeah.
Well, on the one hand, it's like, well, you got your evil villain that rejects the voluptuous capture, so you've got a little bit of a departure from the norm, but then you also are, at the same time, you're also feeding into what would become possibly even more of a stereotype, certainly in the 90s. The like the gay villain that was like,
yeah, it happened a lot.
But the difference here, I think, is that what sets him apart, I think, is that you can, without them having to say a lot, you can pretty clearly understand his pathology, because he's got a very controlling mother who has been training him ever since birth to be this great ruler and full sorcerer and all this stuff. And he is very well up with his controlling mother, number one, is clearly resentful, domineering, feminine presence. So that would make him for sure misogynistic, if not just, his predilections being the other way, playing for the other team. I
think they handled it like well,
Yeah, it was more subtle than, it's, but again, I think they might have been considered more undertones at the time, whereas nowadays we can pick up on it a lot easier. But it's less overt than, say, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, where that was possibly more overt and more like, for lack of a word, like invasive of the actor and things like that. But point being,
the best scream in horror history for sure. I will tell you what.
Point being that I think with this character, I think there was quite a lot of characterization that was established just through behavior and just through his relationship with his mother, that there's a lot of resentment there that would certainly make him a misogynist, if not, full blown.
You can interpret it both ways, and I think leaving it subtle and not, dwelling on it too much is neat, because it allows whoever's watching it to kind of take it however they want.
Which, I mean, he was wanting our hero to take it in whatever way that he wanted, but it was such that. Interestingly, I think that his use of magic in that, I think we said it in that almost kind of orgasmic way, that was kind of interesting, but it also, and so there's some subtleties, some going against the stereotype, other things that kind of go right with it, one of which is sort of his, for lack of a better word, kind of camping about in his evil lair and just kind of like, oh, look at me, I'm catty, I'm, feeling evil today, and kind of almost like throwing hissy fits, basically. And then he sees our strapping hero, and that's when he takes his robe off, and he's like, he doesn't have he's kind of the opposite of everybody else in the movie. He doesn't have a good masculine body at all.
It's like a Skeksis or something. It's pretty bad.
Well, but he also
needs a steel video up in that layer.
Yeah, he needs it. But the it's just interesting because like you see this with either, like, I think he was a lot more overtly gay than necessarily repressed or anything. But even if he was, then it's like, it's always interesting when you see those guys that are like really hyper masculine that oftentimes is kind of a cover for something else that they might be feeling, and so you get some of those little hints here and there, and it's like, oh, gee, he rejects, this vision of female beauty, and then, oh, here's this strapping lad. Let me engage in some man-to-man action here.
Scantily clad combat. I mean, okay, taking a step back from it though, if I'm fighting a naked guy, basically, like, there's only two ways to make it not weird. That's you ask him to put on some clothes, or you just get naked with him, so you're both naked. You know what I mean?
Well, that and also, I mean, let's not forget, that the scantily clad or even nude male is a very scantily clad or nude male on male fighting that is as old as time, and like in terms of civilization.
I won't knock the combat,
particularly with a heavy emphasis on the Greeks, of course. With
Yeah.
well, especially like somewhere like Greece.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, dude.
Really
If you're naked, there's not a lot to grab onto.
In like the Olympics,
there's only the one thing to grab onto. Whereas if you have clothes on, there's a ton of things.
Yeah,
I think he's still pretty badass.
There is a precedent for it,
Oh, definitely. In terms of villains, I mean, he's a good dark wizard character. His mom's got a giant forehead and an awesome cackling laugh. I mean, they're solid characters. They're not amazing. I think both of them kind of.
She kind of has that Cinderella stepmother kind of a voice, so going on. So
and that's very heavily rooted in another archetype, which is the female villain that is no longer is of sexually fertile age, who is jealous of the younger sexually fertile leading lady. And in this case, it wasn't so much jealousy as much as it was, in a metaphorical sense, trying to like almost make her son straight, or make him like more of what she thinks a leader should be. And in this sense, he's like not wanting that. He's really just like, Mom, get out of my life. Let me just rule evil already. God,
I'm busy. Okay, like
I would say the Sheriff of Nottingham and Mortiana from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves are like the first thing I think of that comes to mind when I think of that whole dynamic.
I could see that.
Yeah. And to me, I wasn't as impressed with him as I was with his mother, because really and truly, that is all he did, was kind of sit there bored until the end of the film when he was there. And even then, he was kind of bored with the whole thing.
Yeah.
I can see the kind of gayish subtext that you're talking about, but I could also see it from a period of, this is just a dude that's extremely bored, and he's just like, finally something that I can actually, somebody I can actually kill with my sword, that I just don't feel like just snapping the neck of. He even, because he wanted to pick a fight with the guy, because he was like, I wasn't thinking about banging the girl, but since it looks like it's your girl, I might actually have to go about doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of overlap there. I don't think it's an either or kind of thing. Because you do see a lot of villains that are villains who are royalty, who are just so, because power. Well, that's the thing that a lot of evil villains don't really understand. Once you do conquer the world, once you do have all this power, there's no one to fight, and it gets mighty boring,
Well,
so, I mean, I'm sure that part of what was fueling his...
If you were born in a test tube icicle and not allowed to see any friends or whatnot, wouldn't you rather be a little evil and treat your kingdom a little less negotiable?
Yeah, well, and it's also, if you have a domineering parent, then that's gonna you up in all kinds of ways, make you want to abuse people, or just in like our leading lady's case, just not give someone like that the time of day, because, well, especially it's like if your mom's trying to set you up with a date, then it's like, even then that sort of makes you not resistant, like it makes you resentful of the gesture, you know. So I
Right.
mean, you could definitely say that that's in play.
There was definitely a little bit of a selfish sort of grasp for power element to his mom wanting him to produce an heir to, like maybe someone that might be a little more malleable to her that she can shape better than she did that psycho.
Oh yeah.
And that pretty much covers the main characters. I mean, we have like Jarl and Taro, the king, and like, you know, Tigra's brother, but they're fairly minor, I suppose. We'll get to them as we get to those parts. But basic gist of the story.
And I mean, we're basically just kind of trying to extrapolate or expound upon what is ostensibly they're all extraordinarily archetypical, and I don't mean that as a put down. I mean they embody their archetypes very well, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
It's
not
just
at all.
more so. It's just more so of like, you know, the goal. I think generally speaking, the goal should be with your characters to you can embody an archetype perfectly fine. If you do want to do a twist on it, if you want to give them a little bit more in terms of their behavior, then that's always welcome. But you know, I think of this as sort of like the high fantasy pulp fiction-y equivalent of something like, to make another Disney connection, something like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which looking at it in comparison to other later Disney films, like it's okay. So Snow White's on one end of the spectrum, and something like Frozen's on the other end, where like Frozen's explicitly modern, explicitly not in your stereotypical fairy tale mold. Snow White is explicitly archetypical, and I think it's quite heavily rooted in the actual fairy tale. You know, so in this respect, it's like this is kind of more on that side of the spectrum, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's you know, you can, as long as you do it well, you can do the whole sort of general archetype thing, and if it fits in the story and you do it well with some passion, it's going to be good, you know. And Fire and Ice is a great example of that. It's really more of a visual exercise as a movie. You could just play it on mute with like a Cirith Ungol album blaring over it; it'd still be just as awesome. The basic story of it is,
and you can tell the people who made this, they did care about what they were making. You know, they clearly put a lot of themselves into it. It wasn't just something that they phoned in.
Yeah, no, it's it's as simple and straightforward as it is. It also isn't at the same time, because it's a work of art, man. Even the backgrounds, which we'll get to, I was tripping on this time. I don't think I ever paid as much attention to them before, and they're tasty. But you know, the story is like, you can bang that out real quick. Evil wizard lady has an evil wizard baby, and they're making all this evil ice sprout up around the lands, and it's driving all the people closer to the equator.
Almost like the Snow Queen from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
It's making everything frosty, you know? And these people are like, oh, that's no good because we're mostly naked. And so they move into this Firekeep place, and that's just sort of the whole Fire and Ice gimmick of the movie. Like, they have this lava that apparently could just wreck the entire ice fortress that they could have released the entire time, but just didn't. You know, you don't want to dwell too much on the logic of it, because sometimes that's where this stuff falls apart. But basically, you know, our main character, Lauren, is trying to hold the front line against this ice. He gets knocked out for a minute and ends up, you know, wandering, presumably on his way home to Firekeep, where he runs into Tigra, who was kidnapped after our evil wizard lady and our evil wizard baby, who's now an evil wizard man, sent like envoys or whatever to the fire tower, like under the guise of forming some sort of a truce or negotiating the humans' surrender. They're all kind of humans, but really, it's just a cover for them to abduct Tigra so that Necron, our evil wizard dude, can take her as a bride and create an heir. And basically, the movie is Tigra getting captured, getting freed, getting captured, and getting freed. That's sort of a running thing through the movie. And then them eventually storming this ice citadel and, you know, taking out Necron. Then they almost get melted. They fly around on some pterodactyls. So, you know, first act of the movie, I guess. What do you guys think of our initial scenes there where the ice is pushing forward and we got all those dudes on their pointless little wall. I'm not sure what they were trying to do there. And our first battle, not really much of a battle, more of a massacre with the subhumans.
I was thinking like Game of Thrones on that wall there for a moment, you know. I know that comes way later, but you know, the one guy in Game of Thrones is like the night watch of this wall that's holding up like a glacier.
It did have those vibes, man. I don't know if I pointed it out to my lady when we were watching it, but I know I mentally like took note of, yeah, this is kind of Game of Thrones-ish, only reversed. I don't know. What about you, Forrest?
Almost like a smaller version of something like a Helm's Deep kind of siege.
Right, yeah. It's you know, they get blitzed by those subhuman dudes. It's really, you know, where the animation of the movie really starts smacking you in the face too, like after the wall gets blown up and you see the guys storming forward through the fog, and yeah, you know you're in for a treat from those first frames of like battle animation for sure. I don't know. Any of you guys got any thoughts on it up there, Brandon or Forrest?
I don't really have a lot to say about the plot itself. Looking at the opening scene, it's just that classic good versus evil. But Fire and Ice is a good way of illustrating it. You know, light, dark, black, white, plaid, puce, whatever. It goes into it.
It works.
I was gonna say, like, the depth of this film is pretty much in the title, and you know that's about it. And same with the plot itself. It's pretty much stated in the title of the piece. Which, you know, again, as far as an archetypical story just being done well, it's like, well, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of funny.
What were you gonna say there, Forrest?
No, I was saying, you know, just very standard good versus evil plot. It's done well though.
Yeah, and lots of fantasy movies start with some sort of like barbarian-esque raid going down, and that's sort of, this has some vibes of that. I think my favorite point in all of it is after he wakes up, actually, when he kind of opens his eyes and glances over at that one that's like stumbling around and then fakes like he's sleeping again for a second. And then he grabs that mace and like clocks it. It's just such a good little touch on it, you know, like the way it was executed felt like you were almost watching a live action movie, because you kind of were, you know, it was just animated over.
Well, and talk about our leading lady not just being a pretty face, like she knows that the primitives, that they clearly have the hots for her, and I mean, who would, frankly, except for our villain, of course. But like, she knows that she is able to distract them in that way, but she doesn't just do that. She is able to pretend to be asleep in order to get the drop on someone. She drags a dead corpse that's significantly heavier than she is away, but of course that proves to be a detriment eventually. But it's like, you know, she's willing to do what it takes, and including using her, for lack of a better term, feminine wiles. But it's not all that, you know, she's not above putting a knife in someone's heart, you know.
She's pretty smart for a female character in any kind of, you know, genre films like that. She knows when to stay quiet and be submissive, and she also it doesn't just ever give up through the course of the movie. I mean, dragging that corpse around is a great example.
And despite not having any like battle experience, I mean, we are told that she's taught to be like well educated and everything. So to know that strategization is being put to good use despite the lack of practical real world experience.
Oh yeah, dude, someone had to have taught her a little bit too, because she threw that dagger at that guy later from quite a distance away and nailed him like right in the heart. What were you gonna say there, Brandon?
Especially, go ahead.
I was saying she uses a lot of strategery.
Yes, indeed.
Well, and that's kind of what takes place right after that initial scene. We get the envoys coming, and you know, that's when they abduct Tigra. Those guys look super weird under their cloaks, kind of like Gollum a little bit. And then, you know, that whole slow-mo that they do when those guys are busting in and like, you know, just ransacking the place while they steal her. I love that for some reason, that whole slow-mo bit.
You don't really see much slow motion in animation that isn't like the only things I can think of are like slow motion parts that are meant to be comedic, like the or what this just comes off the top of my head right now is example being like the first Madagascar, like their slow motions used as a comedic device, but you never really see slow motion being used seriously in animation that often. You see it in live action all the time, and again,
Yeah.
you can clearly see that they're using live action not only explicitly for rotoscoping, but they're using the overall storytelling language of live action and just translating it into animation.
Yeah, it was cool as shit. Like that's definitely another one of the scenes in the movie where it feels like you're just watching a live action movie, you know? But you know, she ends up escaping. I think the part with the chain might come later. She escapes at first by like using her assets to distract him so she can swim across that pond. And our main dude ends up, you know, pulling his little sneakiness with the mace and pretending he's asleep, which is pretty neat. And he ends up running away from the subhumans and climbing that massive tree and then doing like that Rambo leap down into that valley. And that's, to me, the scene of the movie where the high quality of the animation really just comes right up and smacks you. Like the way that he's running, his poses when he's like, you know, firing spears at the dudes and stuff, when he throws that axe at the guy. I mean, all of it is just great. And then for some reason, like I just fell even more in love with just the whole sequence of them climbing the tree this time was awesome. You know, dude's getting knocked off of it, and then he gets up there, and I don't know how he knew that he was going to survive that fall. I guess he didn't, but he just decided to go for it. I don't know. Any thoughts
Well, he's
on
like,
that
I'm gonna
scene?
die either way.
Yeah, he's either going to get killed or hopefully not die jumping. So, what do you guys think about that? You know, just the quality of the animation, that sweet booty grab that subhuman gets on him.
The animation was definitely I really like the animation in this one. I'm probably more than like actually I would say like maybe I guess maybe story wise I lean more towards Wizards, but animation wise I would definitely lean more towards Fire and Ice. Just a really good look. It's just a really good looking movie. The landscapes, the characters look with the details. It's just really well. I just thought it was really well done.
Well, those backgrounds, man. I mean, this is also the scene where like it really kicked off me paying more attention to those than I had in the past. Like you can see the brush strokes in the background paintings, and I tripped on that so hard this time. I was looking at every one to try to like see where you could tell that it was a painting, and most of them you can. I mean, it because they are, and it's just beautiful. There's something about that to me that gives it just a weird vibe, but a good one. After this is kind of where they end up hooking up, you know, they stumble across each other. Tigra is pretty playful and kind of flirty about it. Almost. You can tell that she thinks he's a good hunk of man meat right there, right out of the gate. Yeah. And, you know, they're together for a while until they end up happening upon these ruins and, you know, giant squid attack. Very reminiscent of that scene in Lord of the Rings. So I'm sure it was inspired by maybe that scene in the book. I don't remember if it's exactly the same.
Under the sea.
Yeah, there you go too. Pretty badass squid thing too. It chucks our main dude pretty far when he finally stabs it with that bone. I don't know. What do you guys think of the squid attack overall? It's good to have one of those big fantasy creatures at various points in the movie, and I think they nailed it with the squid and the giant iguana.
Good straight up battle.
Well, I'm a big fan of sea life in general, but also just how they can, you know, be pretty cool to look at in these kinds of things. And you know, it was one of those things where he was lucky that he had something to stab that thing in the eye, and I liked that it bled green, and you know, the various parts where people or creatures get asked or whatever, I was like, I heard myself going, ooh, a lot of the time, as far as like when there's a really good hit, one makes. One thing I did want to say with our leading lady and our leading man that, yeah, they do seem to hit it off right away, and they do, snuggle up to each other for warmth because, well, they're both presumably from parts of, well, she is, but I would assume he's not too far off, far from a part of this world that's warmer, so there's a practical reason to it. But it's interesting that we see that, and so our viewers' brains kind of naturally assume, oh, they're gonna fuck, but then the morning after, she tells him, that, oh, I'll let you tag along, but only if you behave yourself. And I'm like, well, I wonder if that meant that they didn't do anything. I don't know. It's kind of up to our imagination, but I found that kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, they're definitely flirting there a little bit with the idea of some stuff, and he's doing his little monkey dance, and then that's when they fall in the water. I thought that was like a cool way to introduce the Squid Attack too, during like this sort of like a sort of flirty, fun kind of a moment. Them just getting around, then all of a sudden, oh shit, giant squid.
And yet, in the same way, because I was reminded of the Lion King, I was reminded of the Lion King again because when Simba was older, when Nala and him were like getting back together, they had a little water moment, and that kind of reminded me of that little segue.
It's interesting with the monkey dance there. It's like, I'm sure that works for some people. I know that I've certainly given that a try in my attempts at mating dance, and sometimes it works, sometimes you just get a look of utter confusion and contempt.
Well, the creatures, the subhumanoid creatures, were actually ape-like. So he was.
Yeah, they were.
I don't know if they're doing mating dances, though. I imagine it's closer to like Clan of the Cave Bear with those dudes.
He was imitating their ape-likeness to her.
It was working too. She's cracking up. But yeah, they get separated again after the squid scene there. And now this is where I'm a little fuzzy here. Let me check this out. I'm not sure if the one scene comes out of sequence after that. Okay, after the giant squid is when Tigra runs into Rolé and her son Atwa, the forest witch, which is also a good staple of this sort of era's fantasy stuff. There's always a forest witch. What did you guys think of that whole scene there?
Yeah.
Actually, she's recaptured, and that's where we get the corpse drag, and then,
I don't know if I felt like it needed to be in there, but much like any type of Conan the Barbarian, it's sort of like you have your main plot, and then you have your adventure along the way. So she was kind of that mini quest, like that mid-boss, I guess you could say. And
a side quest.
Yeah.
I thought she was a cool character, though, nevertheless.
Yeah, she, the performance was great. And again, those are two characters that are voiced and, performance modeled by the same people, Elizabeth Lloyd Shaw and Mickey Morton. And I thought it was cool. Like you said, it doesn't need to be there. They're just, checking it off the adventurer's checklist of those sort of things that you have to do in these movies. It leads to a cool scene later where our main dude is trailing behind her. And he runs across the skeleton who just kind of pops up out of the ashes and is like, how dare you disturb the dead and all that.
There was a torso.
Yeah, it wasn't even completely part of her, burned all the way away. I thought that was neat, and I think that's...
Same here.
That was pretty eerie.
Yeah.
It was cool imagery for sure. Largely unnecessary, but super cool.
As a horror fan, that part really appealed to me.
Yeah, definitely. I'd wear it on a t-shirt or something. And she gets immediately captured again there too, because the subhumans roll up in there now under the command of like baldy subhuman guy. The other guy was kind of bald-ish. They don't really have names. But the one dude gets strangled for losing her in the first place, and then the other guy is in command. And that's when they grab her and take her straight to the ice citadel, I believe, at that point. This is kind of where, our main dude had been helped by Dark Wolf a little bit, but they for real like hook up at this point in the movie, I think.
Well, yeah,
and
he initially gets captured, but then Dark Wolf kind of cuts his bonds with his axe. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, he was like, tying him up so he didn't get himself hurt or something while he's dragging him around with his horse or something like that. But they sort of hook up, and obviously he has his vendetta against, Necron and Juliana, so he's down to help them out and try to get that girl back or whatever. And so, they kind of set off and have a couple of pretty dope battle scenes with each other. Just wasting some dudes with an axe. That's kind of Dark Wolf's whole deal. I think during this portion too is where we get the awesome scene where King Jarl from Firekeep or whatever it was called sends his son Taro to go and try to bargain with Necron and his mom to get Tigra back. He starts talking shit about her, and this pisses off her brother, so he attacks, and he just straight up like Jedi mind tricks them into killing themselves. What do you guys think about that scene?
I thought it was an interesting moment to show you that this boy child could actually kill some people with his mind. So definitely to make sure that the audience knew that he is in fact pure evil. So
well, that was something. I don't know. It just like if what perspective everyone had on this, but because we clearly can see that he has the power over ice, but when we get to that part of the film, I almost kind of wondered: is he just your basic telekinetic, or magically speaking? Or is he like, I almost kind of imagine is if he was like freezing their blood a little bit to try to like control them. I have no way to back that up. It was just more of an interesting hypothesis.
That is interesting. I like it. I'm gonna go with that.
I think that's a little bit more interesting than
super cool.
a simple telekinesis, because we've seen that in every version of Carrie, tons of different X-Men can do that. It's like I think it's a little bit more interesting if he's able to like at least partially freeze their blood.
Or make it cold liquid into
ice,
and then he can manipulate the ice. Super cool. And I liked how he saved the main dude for last. He had to watch all of his guys get killed. That's awesome. And they chucked him right off the front porch like they did with the girl after he turned her down. That's what I don't know why I find that scene so funny, where he's like, "Shah, get out of here. I don't want it." And they just chuck her off the friggin' that little cliff in front of his house. So there's just a bunch of corpses down there. I guess it's a corpse pit. When you're an evil wizard, I imagine a corpse pit's one of the first things you put in.
Well, you gotta have a corpse.
Oh, seriously. But I love that he has no qualms about calling her a slut, and like throw this garbage out.
Yeah, it definitely surprised my lady. We haven't watched too much adult animation together, so when she was like, "Man, they're saying bitch and slut up in here," like, that's pretty crazy. More to come, Jessica. Don't you worry.
Well,
just watch some
times. Nobody gives a shit.
Oh, just watch some of Gretzko in there. That'll mess up some stuff.
Oh yeah, this is definitely your family film, right?
Oh god, yeah.
That'll turn the boys into men real quickly.
So I think after this part is where after Taro and those guys get wasted by Necron is when Larn infiltrates the ice fortress, and I think that's when we get the scantily clad combat between him and Necron. Basically he's able to he probably could have legit beat him in a fight, just like Dark Wolf does later. I mean, he did slash open his like guts there for a minute. He obviously was able to just heal himself or something, which begs the question of is he like a vampire, because he didn't die later until he had an axe embedded in his chest. So maybe it's something like that.
Well, he didn't get hit that hard though. First
Yeah, it was
fight.
just a solid slash. It wasn't he didn't really get any vitals pierced or anything like that. So
I did like that Larn did, in fact, like give him like one big ass sword slash across his chest, got one in, you know.
Yeah.
oh yeah, he was giving him a run for it. I mean, it's just he wasn't obviously strong enough to withstand the magic like Dark Wolf was later on.
And it was actually even more than just getting in a good hit. He actually did a fake out, which I was like, "Hey, that was really clever," you know. And it's not often that in a classic duel like that, it's not often that our hero actually performs a successful fake out in order to get a hit. And it's like, hey, that's something that you don't usually see. Because again,
Yeah.
this is such a simple archetypical story, but that was like, hey, look at that. Well, both he and Tigra, they do show those glimpses of just outsmarting it, in ways.
Well,
that
and
we're
the
not
combat
used to
choreography overall was great. I mean, you can tell they put some thought into it. Like his sword style throughout the movie. Like later when he does hook up with Tigra in the Ice Fortress and he wastes like 3 or 4 of those subhumans as they're coming at him, he gets one guy with like a backward stab slash thing like through his ribs. And he's all crouched down, all badass and stuff. Like, and then Dark Wolf, all of his axe combat was rad. This is one of the few movies where you actually see a dude with a battle axe use it to stab instead of to just chop and slash, which I thought was really cool.
I mean, it's sad that it's an animated film, but obviously it was based on live action footage that they rotoscoped over. But point being that the fight scenes are better shot and better choreographed than most fight scenes in modern movies today, and it's not even live action, and it's like, well, that says a lot about the state of modern action movies and how they don't really seem to know how to shoot action anymore.
Yeah, it's very well done. And I think after that point is, Dark Wolf comes to the rescue again and gets him out of the Ice Citadel, and they finally make it to Firekeep. I think this is the first time in the movie outside of pre-Tigra abduction that we see any of our main characters actually at Firekeep with Gerald. And he pretty much is thinking about releasing this lava, which it seems like, again, they should have done long ago. But, maybe it needed to be close. I don't know.
Well, I was gonna say I would take a slight disagreement with that, just because that's a little bit like saying, well, we've got nuclear weapons, why don't we just kill all the bad guys in one fell swoop? Well, it's because you don't necessarily want to pull out the big guns unless you have to, number one, and number two, it's like you don't necessarily want to be genocidal if you don't have to be. I would think that would and if they were to do that, then it would probably take forever for there to get more lava built back up again. So it's like, well,
yeah, there's some sense to them holding off on it as a last resort for sure.
Yeah.
But basically he's going to give them time. Or Dark Wolf suggests that they just do a full frontal assault on the shit. Like take what is it? The I keep forgetting the name of those damn pterodactyls, man. The fire Dragonhawks. There you go. They take he wants to just take the Dragonhawks up there with Larn and just storm the place and try to kill Dark Wolf, which totally makes sense. So they're holding off on this lava while they go to do that. That's when we get another one of the most spectacular sequences of the movie, where they're like storming in on those Firehawks and getting shot up with the arrows and stuff. And then that kind of culminates with Larn totally eating shit and Dark Wolf like ramming his Firehawk into that partially open door, and we get another sweet slow-mo scene.
Arrows into the Dragonhawk, and then the Dragonhawk like goes into those double doors, and you get you get his entrance into that place like a motherfucker,
Yeah, dude, it is amazing. Like that always never fails to get me pumped up, that scene. Do you agree there, Forrest? You seem to be pretty fired up on Dark Wolf, and that's definitely one of his most iconic moments,
Oh, absolutely. That was probably the one moment, especially at that part, really got me just fired up. can't think again.
Brutality at its best.
Yeah, at its best. It's sad.
Totally. And there's a reason too, like the odd sizzle reel I've seen show Fire and Ice footage. That's, I think, the scene that they show is that part where he like comes through the double doors and it's all sweet slow-mo again. And it's a good example of not overusing a gimmick, because they didn't do a bunch of slow-mo shit in the movie. I think it was just that Tigra abduction and then that scene right there were like the slow-mo parts, you know. And it was effective because we hadn't seen it since, you know, earlier in the movie, and then they saved it for such a glorious moment. And that's pretty much when old Necron thinks that he can step to that shit, and Darkwolf just savages him. We get a lot of flex and pecs, which that's the point where I was like, damn, this dude is super ripped. Like, whoever did this is just a massively impressive physique. And the guy was, I'm sure he did some pre-workout to get jacked before shooting that stuff, because every muscle on the dude's body is just going nuts as he's like flexing against the magic and stuff. And knowing that the dude also did the voice, just I got to see more stuff with this guy in it. Yeah, Steve Sandor, because man, you know, just I'll admit I'm definitely a sucker for those 80s fantasy physiques. You know, it probably factors into why I enjoy a little bit of bodybuilding and like pro wrestling and stuff. Just crazy human bodies are nuts, you know. And this guy's a good specimen of that. You could certainly swing that axe around, but I don't know. What do you guys think of that final, you know, finish there where he puts Necron down for good? I think he gets him in the ribs and then just buries that axe in his chest right in front of his mom.
Yeah, I think I should remember. Did he slice him in the chest first?
He might get him with like a pre-slash, but then he ends up getting him in the ribs, and that's when he's like, and then, you know, he's on the ground like writhing, and his mom comes in, I think, and screams, and he just does him in.
Oh yeah, it's a good final battle. I mean, what you were saying before about not overthinking things or whatever with something like this, because I kept asking myself, not so much about the lava releasing, but I kept asking myself, like, why does nobody bundle up in this obviously cold place? What makes it is it just the fact that he was able to tough it out that made him able to resist his magic enough to get in the fatal blow? You know, the fact that you got Tigra in this really cold place and it was just a little night breeze that was enough to make her cold. And then it's like, how is she not hypothermia and stuff? But it's like, I could go that rabbit hole for it. As far as a fight, I think that it is certainly a good one to cap off the movie with.
Oh, definitely. And you know, it's not as abrupt as the end of our villain in Wizards, but that totally fit that movie. In this one, obviously, you want more of a fantastical spectacle.
I mean, this is like a Masters of the Universe style, like, end of the villain. You gotta, I mean, and it is a Masters of the Universe type character, if you think about it. I mean, this guy is freaking Skeletor, and pretty much anything but name. So it works pretty well.
He's pretty much David Bowie Skeletor. Yeah, I could see that.
He wishes he was David Bowie.
If they did a live action for him, that would be a good. I mean, obviously the dude who was in, you know, rotoscoped over could do it too, but he didn't voice the character also. So I feel like David Bowie would have been a good casting choice if they made a live action adaptation of this back in the day. So after that point, pretty much is when, you know, Darkwolf's dead. They released the lava because it fully came across the river. That was kind of, you know, Jarl's whole specification is if it comes across the river, we're releasing it, basically, whether you guys are in there or not. And they indeed still are in there when it releases. You know, they narrowly escape. We get to see that pretty fairly awesome sequence of the lava melting the ice citadel and all that stuff. And they wake up that poor, pathetic dragon hawk that he left up there. I thought the thing was dead.
Yeah, I didn't know they still had any left.
Yeah, it was looking pretty pathetic at the end there, and I'm sure it was cursing them all the way back down the mountain there.
Just asleep.
He was taking a little siesta there, I guess. And we close with them on the beach having a little smooch, and the pretty awesome backdrop of like the aftermath of this volcanic attack. Very Frank Frazetta. All the backgrounds in the movie are very Frank Frazetta, in addition to just everything about the movie. But those especially, they stuck very true to a lot of his style with it, and I think that background was one of the better ones. And that's kind of, I guess, where we're at here. Favorite scenes or favorite scenes, like imagery, backgrounds. I guess we'll start with you there, Dave.
Well, as far as what again?
Just favorite scenes or scenery.
I would have to say that as far as scenery goes, I guess I like my fair share of looking at female flesh. So I kind of like that part where she's just like got her ass up in the air on that log, and just enjoy the scenery of that. But as far as favorite scenes go, I would have to go with either the scene where the dead torso shoots up to Larn, or that kick-ass dragon hawk leap into the ice castle. So to me, it was like he was doing the Lambo leap off a dragon, So
yeah, it was awesome. What about you there, Forrest? You got a favorite scene?
Oh, I would definitely have to agree with the torso scene. That definitely piqued my interest.
Yeah, it's very well executed. I imagine that was probably one that they like didn't need to rotoscope over or something, but it would have been cool if they really like had a skeleton on set and tried to somewhat do it. I mean, I don't know if that would have lent to the same quality as the other animation, but it would just warm my heart knowing there's a real skeleton there. Yeah, what about scenery? Do you have like a favorite location in the movie that you thought looked particularly, breathtaking or anything like that?
And I think the whole landscape of the movie looked great. Looked amazing. Like all the paint, hand painted. I would have to kind of agree with Dave though. Like as far as the women, and watching Tigra go for a swim.
Yeah, it's hard not to enjoy that for sure. Yeah. What about you, Brandon? Do you got like a favorite scene or scenery?
I enjoyed the little thing where they were talking with the dead person. That was kind of cool. As far as scenery, I don't know. I think that the entire feel of the land, the kind of prehistoric feel, it kind of had just in general, it was a fun scenery set.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent throughout the whole thing. Like those backgrounds, I just can't get enough of them. I almost wouldn't mind having like prints of each of just the backgrounds, like not even the people in them, just the background prints, and frame those bad boys up. That'd make for a nice wall. Maybe a poster of the movie in the center of all of them. I don't know. What about you there, Dane? You got a favorite scene in the movie or scenery?
Well, scenery, I think our dear Tigra's backgrounds and foregrounds are very appealing, which is not a shocker. But I think a couple of particularly amusing bits of that actually, when we first meet her and when she's lounging around, I thought it was funny in terms of proportion, because like this is like the only time in the movie I can really remember this having been done, because they get her proportions to be consistent across the rest of the movie, but in that very beginning scene, you see her sort of, with her legs kind of up to her chest and kind of rolling onto her side, and just for whatever reason, it must have been just the way the animation was done, but it made her look a bit blob-like and a little less, defined, a little bit amorphous. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not the intention here. I think the intention here is to try to make her look sexy and everything, but it's like in their quest to do that, I think they're kind of losing some body definition there. But and so I found that more amusing. But as far as the scene, I really I was impressed with the fluidity of the rotoscoping with any of the fight scenes, and just the fact that you could see them really well. You know, I think that's something that a lot of live action movies could learn from. As far as like locations, I think the one Agrabah looking place definitely stands out.
That was a good one. I don't know. I mean, my favorite scenes are definitely just any of the fight scenes, and I'm kind of with Forrest as far as the scenery. I don't know that I could pick a favorite location, maybe. I think every little brushstroke that I noticed in those backgrounds is my favorite thing of the scenery for sure. If I had to single it down to just one scene, though, definitely Dark Wolf storming through those double doors. It's hard not to get like nerd boner when that's going on. So
Well,
definitely
beyond the main source of nerd boner, I assume.
yeah. I don't know. Those pecs fired me up, man. Fucking dude had a physique on him. He was definitely well trained. I guess all that's really left to touch on is the music, and I don't have much to say about it, honestly. It's serviceable. It's not a score that I'm like going to be going out and getting on vinyl and playing frequently, but it worked and it fit the tone of the movie.
Yeah, it's serviceable. It's not a like, you know, big. It's not. It does the job, but it's not like a super memorable epic score. Nor is it a.
Conan.
Well, it's not a heavy metal type soundtrack either, with a lot of hard rock and metal music to accompany it.
Although the conductor of the music, it was William Kraft. He did the music for Carlito's Way, a movie called Avalanche, Psychic Killer, and Dead Again. So I guess kind of an interesting. And the 1962 version of the Cabinet of Caligari. So.
Nice. Yeah, Carlito's Way is a goddamn classic.
Yeah.
It's it's not bad by any stretch. I think some of it might have been intentional. It's not supposed to be an abrasive, like in your face score. The visuals of the movie are really what they want you focusing on, and I think it does its job while not taking away from that. So yeah, I don't know. You guys got any final thoughts on Fire and Ice here before we close this out?
No,
Not really.
Not really.
I think we fairly well covered it. I mean, if you're a fan of high fantasy or animation, it's definitely something that you should see at least once, if not 3 times in 2 days, like Forrest did. You goddamn savage! I love it. I would highly recommend you get out there and check it out. I believe it is available on Tubi currently, so you can watch it for free. And
That's
it's also
how I
on,
watched it.
yeah, it's on Netflix, or
Netflix.
YouTube. So there's several ways that you can check it out. It's readily accessible, so don't sleep on it. I imagine if you've listened this far, you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't seen it in a while, go check it out.
And if you want to know anything about us, you can definitely catch us up on the next episode, where we'll be going on about the movie Meet the Feebles. So stay tuned for more exciting stuff. And thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, and morning, wherever you are. Thank you for listening. Enjoy.
It's a shame it wasn't really Randy Orton as the main dude, though, because he could have friggin' RKO'd Necron. That would have made my day.
That would have